When I lost my job and could no longer be the breadwinner, my husband and his parents ousted me from our home. Here's the story of how I exacted my revenge. Esmeralda stood silently in the expansive living room, her hands clenched at her sides. The air was thick with tension, the grandeur of the opulent surroundings starkly contrasting with the turmoil brewing within her. Marcus, her husband of 7 years, avoided her gaze, his eyes shifting uncomfortably to the floor. Beside him, his parents, Leonard and Clarissa, sat on the plush velvet sofa, their expressions a mix of disdain and impatience. The words that had just been uttered hung heavily in the room. "Esmeralda, we think it's best if you leave," Leonard had said, his tone void of the warmth she once knew. But why? Esmeralda's voice was a mere whisper, disbelief clouding her usually assertive tone. Leonard cleared his throat, his gaze fixed on a point beyond her. "You know the situation. The company you worked for has collapsed. We can't afford to have someone who isn't contributing in this house." Esmeralda's heart pounded in her chest. She had been the primary breadwinner, her job in a prestigious tech firm not only supporting her and Marcus but often extending to luxurious gifts and holidays for his parents. And now, the sudden loss of her job had rendered her valueless in their eyes. Marcus finally spoke, his voice strained. "Esme, it's just for a while. Until you get back on your feet." She looked at him, searching for a hint of the man she married, but found only a stranger echoing his parents' cold pragmatism. "But this is my home too," she protested, her voice gaining strength. "I've supported this family for years. You can't just throw me out because I'm facing a tough time." Clarissa sighed, a manicured hand waving dismissively. "Darling, it's not just about money. It's about, well, keeping up appearances. You understand, don't you?" Esmeralda felt a surge of anger, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of clarity. These people, her family by marriage, had shown their true colors. They valued her not for who she was but for what she could provide. A bitter laugh escaped her lips, surprising even herself. "Appearances," she echoed hollowly. "Right. I understand perfectly." Without another word, she turned on her heel and strode towards the door, each step a mix of defeat and liberation. As she reached for the handle, Marcus called out, "Esme, wait." She paused but didn't turn back. "No, Marcus. There's nothing left to say." Stepping out of the grand house, the door closing with a final thud behind her, Esmeralda took a deep breath. The cool evening air was a sharp contrast to the stifling atmosphere she had left behind. She had nothing but the clothes on her back and a few personal belongings, but she felt an unexpected weight lifting off her shoulders. As she walked down the familiar path, now a path of exile, Esmeralda made a silent vow. They would regret this day. Not through petty vengeance or spiteful acts, but by witnessing her rise from these ashes. She would rebuild her life, not for them, but for herself, stronger and more successful than ever before. The chapter sets the stage for Esmeralda's journey from betrayal to empowerment, as she faces the harsh reality of her situation and resolves to turn her misfortune into a stepping stone for personal triumph. The small, dimly lit cafe was a stark contrast to the lavish lifestyle Esmeralda had recently been ousted from. Hunched over a corner table, she sipped her black coffee, her mind racing with thoughts. The bitterness of the coffee seemed to mirror her current predicament. Esmeralda had spent the past few weeks in a daze, moving through the motions of rebuilding her life. She had found a modest apartment and started job hunting, but her mind was often elsewhere. It was fixated on revenge, not the loud, dramatic kind, but a subtle, strategic takedown. She knew she had something more valuable than money at her disposal: information. During her time with Marcus and his family, Esmeralda had inadvertently become a vault of secrets, privy to the intricate workings of their family business and the dubious dealings that often took place behind closed doors. Pulling out a small notebook, Esmeralda began to jot down everything she remembered. Illegal financial practices, tax evasions, dubious business deals with shady characters. The list was longer than she had initially thought. Each entry was a potential thread that, if pulled correctly, could unravel the prestigious facade of Marcus's family. Her next move was to rekindle old contacts. Esmeralda had always been good at networking, a skill that had propelled her career. She reached out to former colleagues and friends, setting up meetings under the guise of seeking job opportunities. One such meeting was with Jonah, a former colleague who had ventured into investigative journalism. They met at a bustling bistro, the noise providing a perfect cover for their conversation. "Esmeralda, I'm sorry about what happened," Jonah said, sympathy evident in his eyes. She waved it off. "It's the past, Jonah. I'm more interested in the future. Specifically, the future of a certain family's business empire." Jonah's interest was piqued. "Are you suggesting what I think you are?" Esmeralda leaned forward, her voice low. "I have information. Information that could be of great interest to someone in your line of work." Jonah nodded, understanding the gravity of her proposal. "If what you're saying is true, this could be big. But we need solid evidence." "I know. And I intend to get it." Their conversation laid the groundwork for a partnership that could expose the corrupt practices of Marcus's family. In the following days, Esmeralda transformed her apartment into a command center. She collected data, organized files, and kept in constant communication with Jonah. Each piece of information was a puzzle piece in a larger picture of deceit and corruption. But Esmeralda knew that gathering information was only the first step. She needed to be careful, methodical. A wrong move could not only jeopardize her plan but also put her in danger. As she sat alone in her apartment, surrounded by papers and digital files, a sense of determination settled over her. She was no longer the cast-out wife, the victim of a cold-hearted family. She was a woman on a mission, armed with the most dangerous weapon of all, knowledge. And with that knowledge, she would weave her web of revenge, striking at the heart of the empire that had betrayed her. The walls of Esmeralda's modest apartment were adorned with strings of notes and photographs, resembling the inside of a detective's office. The once bare space had transformed into a strategic war room, where she meticulously plotted her next moves. The late-night city lights flickered outside her window, mirroring the relentless energy with which she worked. Esmeralda sat at her desk, surrounded by stacks of documents and a glowing laptop screen. She had been piecing together the complex puzzle of Marcus's family business, tracing the intricate web of illegal activities and unethical dealings. With each piece of information, her plan became clearer, more precise. The core of her strategy was to leak the information to the right places at the right time, ensuring maximum impact. She intended to remain a ghost in the machine, an invisible force orchestrating the downfall of her betrayers. Her first target was the media. Esmeralda had compiled a dossier of the most damning evidence, ready to be anonymously sent to investigative journalists. She had chosen a select few who had a reputation for exposing corporate corruption. The information would trigger a series of exposés that would bring public scrutiny and shame to the family. The second phase involved the authorities. Esmeralda had enough evidence to warrant investigations by tax authorities and business regulators. She planned to submit anonymous tips and evidence, nudging them to look closely into the financial dealings of the family's empire. Finally, she would strike at the heart of the family's business network. She had information about under-the-table deals and partnerships that, if revealed, would cause their business associates to sever ties, crippling their operations. Esmeralda leaned back in her chair, her eyes scanning over her plans. She knew the risks involved. What she was about to do could have serious legal repercussions if she was discovered. But the burning desire for justice, for revenge, overshadowed these concerns. Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence of the night. It was Jonah, her journalist contact. "Esmeralda, are you sure about this?" "Once we start, there's no turning back." His voice was laced with a mix of excitement and concern. She replied with a calm determination, "I've never been more sure of anything, Jonah." It's time they faced the consequences of their actions. Their conversation was brief, but it solidified the alliance they had formed. Jonah would be the conduit through which her information would flow to the public. After the call, Esmeralda spent the rest of the night reviewing her plans, ensuring no detail was overlooked. She had created multiple encrypted email accounts and used secure channels to communicate. She left no trace that could lead back to her. As the first light of dawn crept into her room, Esmeralda finally allowed herself a moment of rest. She gazed out the window, her mind drifting to the life she once had. There was a time when she would have done anything for Marcus and his family. But that time was long gone. Now, she was a woman on a mission, fueled by a mix of pain and empowerment. This was no longer just about revenge, it was about reclaiming her dignity and showing the world the true face of those who had wronged her. And with her blueprint in place, Esmeralda was ready to set her plan into motion. The early morning sun cast a warm glow over the city as Esmeralda sat at her computer, her finger hovering over the send button. This was the moment of truth. With a deep breath, she clicked it, initiating the first wave of her meticulously planned revenge. Within hours, the effects began to materialize. An explosive article was published by a renowned investigative journalist, detailing the corrupt practices of Marcus's family business. The article, based on the dossier Esmeralda had compiled, painted a damning picture of illegal financial dealings, tax evasion, and unethical business conduct. The reaction was immediate and fierce. Social media erupted with outrage, the article was shared thousands of times, and the family's business reputation began to crumble. Esmeralda watched from the sidelines, a complex mix of satisfaction and anxiety swirling within her. As the public outcry grew, regulatory bodies started to take notice. Anonymous tips, all carefully orchestrated by Esmeralda, led to the initiation of investigations by tax authorities and business regulators. The family, once untouchable and revered in the business community, found themselves under intense scrutiny. The second phase of Esmeralda's plan was set into motion. She leaked information about the family's under-the-table deals to their business partners. One by one, long-standing partnerships began to dissolve, as associates distanced themselves from the tainted empire. The family's financial stronghold was weakening, their empire showing cracks that widened with each passing day. Meanwhile, Esmeralda remained a shadow, her involvement completely hidden from view. She had taken great care to cover her tracks, using encrypted communications and anonymous channels. To the outside world, she was just another unemployed tech professional trying to rebuild her life. But as she monitored the fallout, a sense of unease settled over her. She had expected satisfaction from her revenge, but instead, she felt a hollow emptiness. Watching the empire she once helped support crumble was not as fulfilling as she had imagined. Yet, there was no turning back now. The true test came when Marcus and his parents, now desperate and cornered, began to suspect that someone with intimate knowledge of their affairs was behind their downfall. Esmeralda's name came up, but without evidence, they could do nothing but speculate. Esmeralda knew she was walking a fine line. She had to remain vigilant and cautious. The family was powerful and, despite their current predicament, still had resources at their disposal. She couldn't afford to let her guard down, not when she was so close to achieving her goal. As the days passed, the empire continued to crumble. The once powerful family was now embroiled in legal battles, their public image tarnished beyond repair. Esmeralda watched as their world fell apart, just as hers had months ago. In the solitude of her apartment, Esmeralda reflected on her journey. She had started this path seeking revenge, but now, as she witnessed the consequences of her actions, she realized this was more than just retribution. It was a lesson in the impermanence of power and the price of betrayal. She had sought to dismantle an empire, but in the process, she had also begun to rebuild herself. The once bustling office of Marcus's family business now echoed with a palpable tension. The scandal had taken its toll, leaving a trail of resignations and a once powerful empire teetering on the brink of collapse. In the eye of this storm, Marcus, Leonard, and Clarissa sat in their private conference room, a shadow of defeat across their faces. "It has to be Esmeralda," Marcus said, his voice a mixture of confusion and betrayal. "Who else would have such detailed knowledge of our operations?" Leonard, his face etched with stress, nodded in agreement. "We underestimated her. She knows too much, and she's using it against us." Clarissa, usually the picture of composure, looked visibly shaken. "We need to confront her. We need to know if she's behind this." With their empire crumbling, they saw Esmeralda not just as a suspect, but as a key to potentially salvaging what was left of their reputation and business. Esmeralda, meanwhile, was in her apartment, her eyes fixed on a news report detailing the latest fallout from the scandal. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the caller ID and wasn't surprised to see Marcus's name. It was time. She answered, her voice steady. "Marcus." "Esmeralda, we need to talk." In person, Marcus's voice was urgent, desperate. "I'll meet you. But not at your office or my place." "Neutral ground," she replied, setting the terms. They agreed to meet at a quiet park, away from the prying eyes of the media and the public. As Esmeralda walked to the park, she felt a sense of finality. This confrontation was the culmination of her plan, the final act in a drama that she had scripted from the shadows. Marcus, Leonard, and Clarissa were already there, waiting. Their faces were a mix of anger, confusion, and fear. Esmeralda approached, her posture confident, her expression unreadable. "Why, Esmeralda?" Marcus asked, his voice tinged with a mix of hurt and accusation. Esmeralda looked at him, then at his parents. "You threw me out when I was at my lowest, after everything I did for this family. Did you really think there would be no consequences?" Leonard stepped forward. "Did you orchestrate this? The leaks, the investigations?" Esmeralda met his gaze. "I don't need to answer that. But let's just say karma has a way of finding those who deserve it." Clarissa interjected, "We can fix this. We can make it right." Esmeralda shook her head. "It's too late for that. You showed me your true colors, and now the world sees them too. There was a heavy silence. Marcus looked at her, the realization dawning on him that the woman he once knew was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who had risen from the ashes of their betrayal. Esmeralda turned to leave, her parting words hanging in the air. I hope this was a lesson in humility and integrity, something you severely lacked. As she walked away, leaving them standing in the quiet park, Esmeralda felt a weight lifting off her shoulders. She hadn't just dismantled an empire, she had reclaimed her dignity and forged a new path for herself. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it was entirely her own.